Bonsoir, good evening. I'm Chris Lord-Alge. This is an SSL console, so it's like part of me, and I'm here at Rue Boyer.
I'm not a perfect person.
And we're gonna look at a classic track 20 years later, and the song's called The Reason. It's by a band called Hoobastank.
But I continue learning.
So here we are with obviously my favorite tool. My life revolves around sitting in front of an SSL console, so it's an extension of my creativity. And they have a 48 channel, 4K-E, basically the original model I started on when I first started mixing on a solid state Logic console. So very familiar. I have the original session for The Reason, and I'm gonna open that and see what it looks like. And then I'm gonna conform it and make it work on this console. And I'm gonna take a little bit of the tools we have here, some analog reverb, analog delays, whatever tools I have in the room, a couple of compressors, and make it happen. Let's start with what outboard gear I would use for the session. I will use a 480 reverb, which I've been using since the beginning of time, because it's something I'm familiar with. As I look around the room, I see a lot of great EQs, a lot of outboard gear, but I'm gonna use my trusty console to do most of the heavy lifting. But I do see some things I'm familiar with. If I go back in time to the 80s, I see a pair of AMSs, so I have a reverb, a delay unit, okay, which I'm quite familiar with, and even some tape slap, which would be fun. I love a little tape slap if I can use that. I see a Bricasti over there. I know I'll use that, but even more interesting, they have a Ursa Major space station. For those that aren't familiar with it, it's a very cool customer. It makes a very cool sound. It's like a multi-tap delay that kind of sounds like reverb. I use it for like a room sound, but it really helps the vocals have a beautiful landscape around them. And if I look in the racks, I also see a pair of original black-faced 1176s. Those will be used. And I see a Neve 33609. I'll use that as something I'm familiar with. I'll start there and see what I expand on, but most likely I'll keep it simple, unless needed, and utilize some plugins. The original mix, I didn't use any plugins. I used analog reverb, analog delays. This time, I'll probably use more plugins for EQ and stuff and compression, and let the console add all the personality. So let's get started. Let's open this original session, which I've just done, and I just named it The Reason RB for Rue Boyer, which is where we're at. And I look at what we have. So I see very familiar wording. So this is just all one monochrome color. I see vocal double. I see the harmony. Okay, sounds familiar. I see some stuff grayed out. First thing I'll do is there's a preference so I can see the colors better. So let's just fix that. So we need to have track color, track type. We start there, and there, at least it all goes blue. What that did is just shows me if there's muted regions. So I see there's mutes in the session, okay? So not really a consolidated file that goes in the vault. So I'm looking down, I see guitars, all looks familiar. Trim, lead guitar, okay. I see bass, I see drums. I see samples, okay. I see samples, all right. I see tom bounces, okay. So I see all the basic elements, all right. I will configure the session for what I need here. The first of all is I'll adjust my view by adding the comments, adding the inserts, and of course adding the I/O, right? And I'll look at it, okay, everything is set at one volume. So I'll look over here, select all, and I'll flip the view. All right, so its faders are all just pulled down and nothing's active, right? One of the first things I do is I start moving things around, I start coloring them and getting them organized so I can output the session. I don't have a rough mix, I don't have the original mix on this, but I kind of know the song 20 years later. So I'm not gonna try to compare to what I did. I'm just gonna go from scratch and make it work. So I'll clean up what I'm looking at here and make it simple, view-wise, okay? I guess I'll need the tempo. That might come in handy. So, okay, the tempo is 83. This way I can set my delays. Now, since I have analog delays, they don't work, as the host, right? The host doesn't help. So the first thing I'll do for me is just look at, let's see, I'll put a delay on anything just to find out what the number is. So my eighth note, okay, 361. And then if I look at the quarter, so I don't have to add, I'll just go, okay, what's that going to be? All right, 722. Got it. So I will go to my unit. I'll set those up that way. I'll take the plugin off. What I will also do is I'll consolidate these files and get rid of all the edits. So if something's grayed out, it was muted in the original record, and I'm just going to go with that. So we'll do the organizing and we'll put it together. All seems to make sense. I'll start outputting, colorizing these things and make the session work. I'll look over here and see some of these delays and set those. So be right back with you. So if I go over to the wall here, okay, I look at what we have. Okay, I have a Bricasti, and I've started by putting the delay times in here. So this is my long delay. Okay, this is a twin unit. So this is my long delay, and the A side and the B side is the eighth note. So I have those set, okay? I have a little regen on both of them. So this is, a stereo unit. Then of course, the song is a little bit slow, so I want to have a little length on my reverb. So I love the ambience setting. So I've gone to just 2 seconds on the ambient setting and then take the filter. So, because if I go to the stock version, right, of this program, it will be different. So look, there's the stock version at 4 seconds. That's too much. So down we go to 2. And then sometimes it's too dark or I'm too old. 2 seconds there. This is already at 1.8. I'll use that. That is on a preset that I'm familiar with. Studio A, right? I like the Studio A room sound. Stock, it's a lot shorter, so I just make it longer. That's fine. I use this for slaps, so hey, just pop it and record. I have it set for 7.5 Vari-Sped, so I'll try that on for size. I'll leave that off until I start mixing, so I'm not just letting it run forever. Below it here, Ursa Major Space Station, okay? An odd piece. So you have 2, 4, 6, 8 delays in here, and I have a setting on here that it's called Rooms 2, or a Cloud is the setting. So I basically use the same setting I use at home. We'll see if it translates and see if it gives me the same effect I'm used to. So there's basically my effects. Let's walk over here and see what the 480 looks like. I'm kind of a creature of habit, so I will just go over here, put the program A-Plate on, which I've been using for the last couple 100 years, load it in and put it to the pre-delay that I use, which is around 150, and the stock reverb time is fine for me, okay? I'll put that on. Now, because the console's only 48, I'm gonna utilize the stereo reverb returns for these 3 reverbs to save space on the console, okay? As we move over to the first bucket, I will put delay 1, delay 2, here's my AMS DDL. I'll put my Ursa Major here, okay? And I'll put my tape slap here. And then this one fader, I'll use this for my delay throws. I will send and have this. Basically, I'll send a signal to this channel, and when I turn it on, it'll send it to the delays. Something I do on every mix. So I have that nicely condensed here. I've already written up what I'm gonna be using, okay? So I have to just park all those things there in those places, and I fill the console right up pretty quickly. So I've already basically written it up. So now I'm just gonna fill in the dots. I'm gonna put all the outputs assigned and get started with that. So be right back with you after I start doing some assigning.